Welcome back. I've been speaking with former Chief Economic Advisor of India, Dr. Subramanian, who has now been appointed Executive Director for India in the board of the IMF. Dr. Subramanian, thank you very much for waiting patiently. Well, let me come to the two external bugbears as I see it. One is that it looks like, there are several experts who say the Fed may have to take the Fed funds rate well up to 4% at least, though the market now thinks it's probably 3.5, 3.75. And plus, crude is not really climbing down. Okay, it's not 120, 130, but it still seems to linger at the three-digit mark. Do you think these two can pose both an inflation and a growth threat? First, an inflation threat. Reserve Bank will have to respond if the currency is facing this interest rate differential, no?
So here, Lata, I actually was looking at, some of the data and analyzing it carefully. As we all obviously appreciate, the exchange rate is affected by many factors. But when you sort of put it through a careful analysis, what turns out is that it is actually the inflation differential that affects the exchange rate depreciation far more than the interest rate differential. And I'm not sort of ignoring the fact that the interest rate differential could in fact be impacted by the inflation differential through monetary policy. Yes. But for the moment, let's sort of set that aside, that nuanced argument. But I think if you look at the inflation differential, right, I think that we basically have undergone a regime change, especially with the inflation targeting that got implemented, and the fact that globally inflation is going to be higher. So let's look at, for instance, if you take maybe before 2016, the US inflation would typically have been 1.5%, and India's inflation historically has been 6.5%. So the differential was about 5%. In contrast, going forward, because of the monetary policy framework, we will be looking at, let's say, about 5% inflation, could be 5.5, but in that range, right? The US actually might be looking at a similar inflation, if not more, in which case the inflation differential does narrow down significantly. Yes. Where is 5% and where is basically about maybe 1% or so. It could possibly be, directionally, or could be opposite as well. That does mean when you look at, in the long run, and what I was telling you was based on analysis of 30 years of data, so 120 quarters. So I think that is something that will start playing up. I don't think market participants have actually focused as much, in my opinion, I could be wrong, on this aspect, but long run, this is something that will matter a lot. Now, I think I've already spoken about the influence of external factors, whether it is the commodity prices or, monetary policy of the Fed. I think we tend to overblow the impact of these on the Indian economy. Fundamentally, if you look at the data, if you analyze carefully, I am not convinced that the kind of, overblowing that happens among commentators is actually demanded.
Okay. No, I was not speaking so much about inflation itself as much as, say, current account deficit. If crude continues at $100, exports are also not doing that well. The last July number, exports grew by only 2% YOY because there is a recession threat in destination countries. So do you think that current account deficit is a headache for us?
Yeah. No, I think so. Again, let me sort of just tweak the question a little bit, right? Why do we worry about current account deficit? We worry about it, from a macro perspective. And here again, when I was in North Block, we had analyzed this. So if you look at the crises that India has undergone, whether it is the 1991 balance of payments crisis or the taper tantrum, episodes and other episodes, even the Asian financial crisis, etc. What stands out very clearly that it is that, when India faces a triple whammy, which is current account deficit, fiscal deficit, and high inflation, that's when India becomes extremely vulnerable. That's point number one, a very, very important point for us to keep in mind. And in fact, if you look at the taper tantrum, let's take that as an episode. We were actually facing double-digit inflation for 1.5 years, every month, 1.5 years. Current account deficit was close to 6%. And our fiscal deficit was almost 300% of our peer economies. It's these triple whammy that actually led to the external sector problems. Now, I'm not sort of saying that current account deficit is not something that we should be watching very carefully.
Yeah.
But again, I want to actually sort of be wise enough to actually to warn viewers to not overblow these things. I think on the fiscal deficit and on inflation fronts, I think we are doing fine. So while and a last point I would say is, when I took over as CA, I had conversations with a lot of people. Very sage policymakers said 2.5 to 3% current account deficit is something that India can take, and so in that sense also, I think we are comfortable. But I would keep, I think you asked an important question. Policymakers need to keep an eye on the current account deficit, but in isolation, it is not as much of a worry as it is when it's combined with high fiscal deficit and with, high inflation as well.
Well, I take your point entirely. 2.5%, I think, was our Lakshman Rekha, and maybe 1 year we can take 3% without, shrieking over it, simply because the world is also in the same boat. But fiscal deficit, can you be so confident? I mean, we were at 10.4 in the year of the crisis, COVID crisis. We have come down to only 6.4. Our combined deficit, the stock for the country itself is 90%. That's debt to GDP. A large part of our revenue receipts are going to service interest rates. Is not that a worry? I mean, we don't have elbow room in fisc.
No, I'm smiling, Lata, because I thought you would certainly know this. We wrote entire chapter in the economic survey, on this precise aspect. Remember that debt sustainability or debt to GDP ratio is based on the R minus G differential, the difference between the nominal rate of interest and the nominal rate of growth. Okay, and now many people, and I see a lot of incorrect commentary on this. Look, it is the primary deficit and the R minus G differential that is what has an impact on debt sustainability. Fiscal deficit is just a outcome. Primary deficit plus interest payments, which basically is based on past borrowing. So many people say, oh, large part of our our revenues are going into interest payments. That is the wrong way to look at it. As long as our growth is actually greater in nominal terms than the nominal rate of interest, debt sustainability will have only one path, which is down. And that is the right question to ask.
I did not speak about debt unsustainability. I am only saying fiscal space to stimulate goes down. I am not speaking about unsustainability at all, and I am taking your point on the sustainability of our debt and our ability to pay. Okay, since I'm
let me add to that.
I'm warned I'm running out of time, so I wanted to ask you this question, which I have seen you speak about in other interviews and written about it. This K-shaped recovery. You have believed that it is India is not in a K-shaped recovery. Now, I brought in a lot of proof overnight because I want to present that to you. And one of that is, rural wages. Rural wages, if you compare it before COVID, it has not risen. And especially if nominal wages itself has not risen. If you juxtapose it with rural inflation, then real wages have gone down. In urban wages, I was just reading a city report which shows that the large companies' wage bill has done very well. But MSME wage bill is actually showing a lot of pain. And the last proof I want to bring is FMCG companies, Dabur, Marico, Nestle, even Hindustan Unilever are really crying about volumes and the premiumization trend. Mass products are not in demand. Two-wheelers not in demand. Four-wheelers, yes. There is a K. You can't ignore it, can you?
I absolutely will ignore it, but I'll tell you why. So I think this is where I think, again, we should be careful, right? Any year, normal year or crisis year, is it ever the case that all sectors of the economy grow at the same rate? Like the 5 fingers in a hand, they're actually different sizes. It is always the case that, that in the economy, different sectors basically grow at different rates. For instance, just, if you take the global financial crisis, the manufacturing sector was, indeed very, very badly affected. Services, not as much. Yes. Now, that is a fundamental aspect of any economy. So I actually find it extremely disingenuous to actually call what is basically, at the macro level, a V-shaped recovery by, saying, oh, this sector is growing more, that sector is growing less. That is disingenuous, because that is a fundamental aspect of any economy, and a large economy, a rich economy like us. Can you even expect that actually it will basically have the same uniform growth rates everywhere? I think that is just basically being in a utopian world. So absolutely will say this term is completely misplaced, and a lot of commentators, I think, without understanding it well, bring this up. It has been a V-shaped recovery if you look at the GDP growth, and these kind of features are always there in any economy, in a good year or in a crisis year.
Thank you very much, and all the very best from all of us at CNBC TV18.
Thank you very much, Lata.
Okay, with that, we wrap up this special show. Thank you much for watching.